Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of a few people in regards to the whistleblowers, in regards to the aliens. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro first. Okay, before diving into the content of this video itself, first, thank you for being patient as I've been sick and a little bit away from uploading videos. I'm feeling better now, fortunately, but if you hear me coughing or sounding weird, that is why. Also, I have set the ability for people to become members to the channel. If you would like to be able to show some extra support to the channel, feel free to. You get things like emojis and there are different perks. So if you would like to be able to become a member, go ahead and check that out below. I think that's all of the different announcements of things. Let's go ahead and start into this hearing here. I have gone through and tried to find some of the more engaging or interesting questions and nonverbal communication around that so we can kind of talk about what we see there. Let's go ahead and just dive in.
Right, now I'd like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Lieutenant Ryan Graves. He's the Executive Director of Americans for Safe Aerospace. Lieutenant Graves is also a former U.S. Navy F-18 pilot with his own UAP experience. The next witness, David Grush, is a former senior intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and was a senior technical advisor for UAP issues. And finally, retired Navy Commander David Fravor, squadron leader who worked as a naval aviator for 18 years. Mr. Fravor has his own UAP experience, known as the TikTok event. I look forward to hearing from all three of you today. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witnesses will please stand and raise their right hands.
I'm going to go ahead and pause there. So we're able to hear a little bit about who we're working with, who we're dealing with. Something that I want to be able to make a note of at the very end there while talking about Mr. Fravor is that he does a small little contempt smile in regards to how Mr. Grothman here pronounced the phrase tic-tac event. He sounded like he said TikTok, and there's a little smile of contempt that comes in regards to that. So already we're just seeing a little pop of nonverbal communication, but obviously this is just an introductory part. There's nothing really to go off of with that. So we're about to start diving into the actual stuff itself. Let's watch them actually get sworn in under oath.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Let the record show that all the witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may be seated.
Going to go ahead and pause there too, because in that I saw throughout the three of them, they were all doing micro nods yes. Along with that, there had been perhaps a micro shake no. Could have been a low-level red flag, but at least at this part, the micro shake yes does enforce what they're saying. I mean, again, there's nothing really to go off of for them to even be needing to say something deceitful. But again, there we go. We're still understanding a little bit more. Let's keep watching.
This is for any one of you. Based off of each of your experiences and observations, do you believe UAPs pose a potential threat to our national security?
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
I'm going to go ahead and pause here. So throughout his speaking here, we're seeing a lot of head shakes no in there. Now, that could be a point of desynchronization. Perhaps he's saying something that he doesn't believe, and therefore it's slipping out non-verbally. However, along with that, since they are fairly macro, they're fairly easily controlled, we might be able to assume that they are also centered around that you might not know or you would not believe. So while he's talking about these things that seem fairly unbelievable, it seems as though his nonverbal communication is still reinforcing that, even just by how he's holding himself. You could also see a couple of these placating gestures where he's raising his thumbs up. So we're seeing that sprinkle across here already. During that time, I didn't see anything that pushed me away to believing that he was being deceitful or trying to hide or mask anything else, but it's still early days. Let's keep watching.
Okay. You two?
Well, I would also like to add from a commercial aviation and military aviation perspective, we deal with uncertainty in our operating space as a matter of our professional actions. Identifying friend from foe is very important to us. And so when we have unidentified targets and we continue to ignore those due to a stigma or a fear of what it could be, that's an opening that our adversaries can take advantage of.
Briefly,
Going to go ahead and pause here. Nothing from him that seemed to push me away from his point of view either. And it is a fairly good point, even if this whole discussion doesn't unveil the existence of extraterrestrial life or intelligent life that's non-human. At very least, it is something that needs to be destigmatized so that we can actually approach it. So that is a good point to be able to be made. We're already going through these questions here. Let's keep watching.
either describe or note that aircraft that we witnessed, particularly by the 30 folks that you're working with, are essentially outside the scope of anything that we know of today and the technology we have today. Mr. Graves, Mr. Fravor?
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country. And that applies for the military as well.
Mr. Fravor?
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and go back up.
Thank you. My last question, and some
Going to go ahead and pause this here as well. So with this, I'm still trying to pay attention to see if there are any areas where there might be a desynchronization point, there might be any of the closing off nonverbal communication, there might be any halts or breakages in any of these flows, especially verbally as well, as a person starts to have more difficulty speaking around a certain thing. And so far, I'm still not seeing anything from that. Now, one of the big arguments against these sightings, especially the ones that have been videoed, is that perhaps it's done via CGI. There's even some very well-known series on YouTube addressing some of these footages and have been debunked through their understanding of visual effects. And so that is still something that's possible here. The big key factor in this will be the eyewitnesses in regards to these sightings as well. So we're going to go ahead and keep unpacking this and keeping in mind all of these different moving parts that do exist outside of it as well. But let's keep watching.
sometimes I know that you have also said some of these answers in the past, but we're trying to get them on the public record as well, which is really important. Mr. Grish, finally, do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Mr. Grish.
I'm going to go ahead and pause here. So throughout that, he is nodding yes in affirmation to what he's saying, so that would be considered synchronized. We're not seeing any of the no shakes in there, either micro or macro, to where it's perhaps a desynchronization point or the you wouldn't believe side of things. We're also seeing synchronized nonverbal communication across his hands as well as he's gesturing in time with the words that he's saying. These are all pushing me to believe authenticity. Now, at the beginning, he does have an absolutely. So there's a pause and then there's the absolutely coming in there. So that is really trying to hammer home that part. It's a red flag for me. It doesn't mean that he's being deceitful, but it is something that he really wants to emphasize that statement. It does make sense contextually in that this is a pretty big question, so emphasizing it does kind of hold that weight. Something that I see that pops up regularly with his nonverbal communication is a pretty substantial lip compression that comes in there. Now, lip compressions can be centered around that. I said something that I shouldn't have. A lip compression comes out. It could also be centered to something that is negative. A lip compression comes out. So we could see that coming out in there. And then at the very, very end, he does reposition and fold his arms across a little bit more tightly, which could be considered a defensive gesture and cluster in regards to that question. So it's something to keep our eye on. Regardless, still so far, what I'm seeing is synchronized nonverbal communication. There hasn't been too much to go off of, so let's just keep going.
General.
Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's zero airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Mr. Favor.
Okay, so now we're bringing in some of the physics issues of this. throughout this, he does have a number of verbal stammers and stutters that could be related to at least extra psychological processing. Now, I don't know for sure if he's a scientist in the realm of physics himself. I don't believe so. He doesn't mention that, and there hasn't been anything that I've seen on that. So perhaps that could be part of his issues, trying to juggle these terminologies that he's not himself an expert in. So that does pop up. But then this also does bring into light some of the other things that have been reported, that have been said around the movement of extraterrestrial, of these UAPs, is the ability to move in ways that seem to defy our current understanding of physics. And so that's a fascinating thing to be able to make note of, that has also been pulled up and brought up across not just this hearing here, but many other statements, witnesses, things like that as well. So let's just keep watching throughout these, and we'll gather as much information as we possibly can.
Mr. Favor, what astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac, very briefly?
The performance, absolute performance. It was,
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
no, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
Do you have any personal knowledge of people?
Nothing really to comment on the nonverbal side of that. Again, everything seemed to be fairly synchronized. I'm also not hearing any changes in pitch and tone, or even the force behind that as well, as we're listening to these, to maybe indicate a level of agitation or a lack of confidence as that could be displayed throughout the tone. So I'm still trying to keep my eye on all of these different things. So far from what I'm seeing, everybody seems to be fairly synchronized and fairly authentic. Also, though, this is not the first time that they have answered these questions. They have answered many questions like this before, so this is, on some level, all going to be somewhat rehearsed. But with all of that in mind, this is just still what I'm seeing. So let's keep seeing this.
People have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal these extraterrestrial technology.
Yes. Personally.
Have anyone been murdered?
I'm going to go ahead and pause there. That yes, long silence. So that yes in response and the long silence afterwards, the yes was very prompt, very quick. Now that either means that he didn't have to think about it, or also it's something that is easily able to be recalled for him, or go just yes. Or it's something that he's rehearsed so many times that it's just an automatic answer too. In this area, especially considering the heft and weight behind the question, has somebody been injured? In regards to these, that would be something that would be easily recollected. So in that realm of things, that's not really popping up as a red flag to me. Then there's that area of silence by the questioner as well. And the intention of that is to be able to provide enough space for him to continue his answer. And the only thing that he says after this is personally, and he has his very well-known and repeated lip compression after that. So that's something that I want to be able to make note of, is that speed in response, and then the lack of needing to pack his answer with extra details that might seem a little bit more deceitful is also absent there. He still seems to be pushing me towards authenticity in this part. Very fascinating so far. Let's keep watching.
That you would that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in a
No shakes during that. Have to be careful when asking that question. So the no shake in there does relate a little bit to what he's saying. I have to be careful with a pretty prominent no shake. The negative goes with the negative. It is something still to be able to make note of, that's what's happening non-verbally while he's responding to that. Let's see how this plays out.
if we could get in a confidential area of SCIF, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the SCIF. And that's very unfortunate in this scenario.
Are there common characteristics to the UAPs that have been cited by different pilots? And can you describe what the convergence of descriptions is?
Certainly. We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Yes, inside of a clear sphere, where the apex or tips of the cube were touching the inside of that sphere. And that was primarily what was being reported when we were able to gain a visual tally of these objects. That occurred over almost 8 years.
And that's fascinating to me. So his response is very fluid all the way throughout. He's not having any ums, uhs. It doesn't look like he's breaking eye contact to maybe reimagine something or pull something up or invent something in his imagination. We're not seeing anything like that. And then also the visual that he's describing does not go along with like the pop culture understanding of spacecraft that we have today as far as the flying saucers or something along those lines. So it doesn't sound like he's trying to pander to what is already preconceived with this idea of a translucent sphere with a cube on the inside. Sounds very different than what our understanding is as a general population. So both of those actually do push me towards authenticity on his part as well. That original idea and concept of the visuals, and then his fluidity in his response as well. Both of those are still pushing me towards believing him.
And as far as I know, it's still occurring.
Okay, and then my last question for you before I move to Mr. Graves is you received prior approval from the Defense Department to speak on certain issues, correct?
Correct, through DOPSR, DoD Pre-Publication and Security Review. And I just want to remind the public, they're just looking from a security perspective. These are my own personal views and opinions, not the department's.
Okay, I'm asking that, though, mainly.
So that's something that we need to be able to just, as a viewer, keep in mind, is that these are his personal views and opinions, not of the entire department themselves. And that's kind of the point of the whistleblower program and what he's taking part in and of himself. Now, what I want to make note of non-verbally with that is he, again, has this lip compression that he does every single time. And this seems to be perhaps his way of accenting the end of his statement, as he has done it again and again and again. And even in the areas of this hearing that we're not seeing here in this video, I saw that happen repeatedly, and it didn't seem to have any correlation to anything else other than I'm finished with my sentence. So it could be a nonverbal period for him. Let's see if that lines up throughout the rest of the hearing. Let's keep watching.
Though, mainly because I think that there are many people that would like to discredit you. So it does bring a certain amount of credibility to your testimony.
I'm required by law to do that as a former intelligence officer, or I go to jail for revealing classified information.
Yeah, we don't want you to go to jail. My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves.
I'm going to go ahead and pause it there. So something that he does non-verbally with his facial expression on that is raises his eyebrows up. He also does a smile. He does a repositioning, open body language. All of this is to try to maintain a level of rapport with the person asking questions. That is technically a low level of manipulation. Everybody technically does this level of manipulation of wanting to be able to get a person to be on their side. So we're seeing that pop up here. It's not a negative of manipulation, but it is one that is popping up. And considering everything else so far, it still seems as though he's being authentic and sincere with his nonverbal communication. So we're going to go ahead and have to just hear how this plays out.
Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities.
Some difficulty there. You heard that come up with some very substantial verbal stuttering and stammering, long breaks and pauses in between there. We're also seeing some difficulties with the hand shrugging in there as well. So something around that, perhaps it's there's a visual detail that's being omitted. Perhaps there's something that is coming to his mind, or it could even be the very fact that he knows that what he's saying sounds unbelievable or unrealistic. So he's having difficulty presenting that in an area that people are being hypercritical of. So there are a number of things that could explain that cluster that just popped up there, but it's something that we do want to be able to keep track of in regards to this. Maybe there's something about the size, some detail that's off. Regardless, as nonverbal communication popped up something there.
Facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you'd be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
All right, so all throughout that, he doesn't have any areas of desynchronization. He also doesn't have any areas of breaking in his flow of words. So again, being pushed towards authenticity on that. He also doesn't break eye contact at any level, especially around certain hot points or key points of the phrasing that he's using to perhaps indicate a level of discomfort that he's going through psychologically. It's harder to hold eye contact with somebody when you're going through psychological discomfort, be it guilt, shame, anything along those lines. So we're seeing him hold that steady gaze there, and his nonverbal communication is fairly fluid as well. So all of these are still pushing me to believe that he at least believes what he is saying. So let's keep watching.
Gentlemen, let's talk about the laws of physics for a second. Mr. Graves and Commander Faber, I heard you talk about speed. When those objects broke the sound barrier, did they make a sonic boom?
If I was in a jet, you can't hear anything. It's kind of loud in there.
Yeah, you're not able to actually personally tell within the vehicle. I will say the objects that we were seeing, they were spherical, and they were observed up to Mach 2, which is a very non-aerodynamic shape.
What about G-forces? Let's talk about G-forces of those.
Okay, so this is fascinating, talking about the sonic boom when you pass the sound barrier and break that. And I do appreciate the humor from one of those saying like, no, I was inside of a jet. It's fairly loud, really hard to hear outside of the jet. So that's a fairly tangible and practical response to the question itself. And then it was also kind of picked up and carried from there on out with a little bit more explanation, especially around the fact that these UAPs are not aerodynamic on any level. They're not designed, it seems to be, in regards to dealing with friction from our atmosphere, wind, things like that. So that is a fascinating factor in and of itself.
Forces of those vehicles. Could a human survive those G-forces with known technology today?
No.
No, not for the acceleration rates that we observed.
Okay. What about what they look like? How close did you get? Did you see a seam or a rivet or a section? And what I mean is, obviously, the jets you're flying have all those things. Did these objects have those?
Do you want to?
I didn't have the detail to be able to tell that.
So we got within a half mile at Zig-Tac, which people say that's pretty far, but it's in airplanes, that's actually relatively close. No, it was perfectly white, smooth, no windows. Although when we did take the original FLIR video that is out there, when you put it on a big screen, it actually had two little objects that came out of the bottom of it. But other than that, no windows, no seams, no nothing.
Mr. Grush,
Again, throughout that. So what I noticed at the beginning of Fravor's response to this as well is a nose shake with a mouth shrug in there, and the mouth shrug and the hand shrug, all of these shrugs and that indicate that possible, I don't know. And so that does line up. Like, no, not that I know of side of things. So seeing that still come in here, I am seeing that Mr. Fravor seems to have more of the relaxed, basic, not as professional, nonverbal communication displays. The other two seem to be functioning a lot more through that professional lens. So just some more understanding of what we're getting to see here. Again, though, as we're continuing through this, I'm still not seeing anything that's really pushing me to believe that these people are being intentionally deceitful about what they're saying. So let's keep watching.
as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself about ATs, advanced technologies that the U.S. government has?
Based on conventional advanced tech, I was briefed to the preponderance of the Defense Department's both space and aerospace compartmented programs. Yeah.
This is a fascinating response. This one doesn't fit in with his other one. So the first one, he just answers, there's a pause where he opens his mouth, there's a pause, and then he responds in the affirmative. And then this one, he adds a lot of extra complex words. There's some stuttering and stammering around it. And all of these are making me question what exactly is encouraging that. Why is he displaying that here? And perhaps there is something technologically speaking that we, as the public, are not privy to or are not aware of. And so he's having a difficult time trying to present information that says, yes, this was advanced without disclosing other information. That's what this is giving me. That's the sort of vibe that we're seeing here from this. Perhaps there is technology available to the human species that we are not privy to as of yet. Usually we're pretty behind the curve as the general population goes. So let's keep watching.
So,
Do you have knowledge or do you have reason to believe that there are programs in the advanced tech space that are unsanctioned?
yes, I do.
Okay.
As a U.S. government,
Again, a very long pause. Yes, I do. Affirmative head nod in there as well. We're seeing his very customary lip compression afterwards. Fascinating to be able to make note of. Again, I'm still having difficulty around the earlier cluster that we noticed in regards to that. Let's keep watching.
government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
At one point, you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured, and the activity. And I got
by UAPs or by people within the federal government.
Both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed myself and my wife was very disturbing.
Okay, so this is a fascinating part here, the question of whether or not there has been more or less not so hot interactions between humans and these non-human people or beings. And his response at first is fairly affirmative, but once we start chipping away down to the specifics of it, it kind of seems to unravel a little bit to where now it's boiled back around to what he personally has seen. And we're seeing a very substantial lip compression in there with a pulling of his mouth to the side here. This section here, it does pop up a low-level red flag just because of the burst in nonverbal activity alone in regards to his responses, along with some of the verbal patterns that we're picking up as well. So I'm not certain as to what that does play out as. I'm not sure whether or not he's not actually confident in what he's saying there. So maybe there wasn't something that was negative or hurtful or violent and on any level. Perhaps it's that he's not comfortable talking about it in this setting. It's difficult to say. Regardless, his nonverbal communication is showing us that he is having difficulty around that, and it could be a red flag as though he might be giving some misinformation. Now, again, we're still functioning under the idea that he is saying all of this under oath. So he really should not be lying in this specific situation, but it's very rare that a person should lie. And so however many hoops that a liar has to jump through to lie, oftentimes they will. So that's something that we're just keeping in mind as we go through this.
Okay. One of my constituents actually sent this next question, and I figured I'd ask it since I had the same thought. You've said that the U.S. has intact spacecraft. You said that the government has alien bodies or alien species. Have you seen the spacecraft?
I have to be careful to describe what I've seen firsthand and not in this environment, but I could answer that question behind closed doors. Yeah.
And have you seen any of the bodies?
That's something I've not witnessed myself.
Okay, well, that does kind of make it fairly straightforward. So first question, have you seen these aircraft? And he says, I can't really answer in this area. Have you seen the bodies? No, I haven't. So if he didn't see the aircraft, it seems as though he could have just answered, no, I haven't seen that. He doesn't have an issue with answering, no, I haven't. So just playing that patterns game there, it is something that seems to be questionable around that. Now, in regards to that, it's difficult to be able to pull any other information out of the little blip that we see here as to what he might have seen or might not have seen, but it does seem as though he has seen something in regards to at least the technology side of things. Let's keep watching.
Okay. And so with that being said, and the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, and number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework.
Okay, so to answer and to address that first question that he answers in response to is that his response is more or less, yeah, everything crashes. He's kind of playing the numbers game on that, but it doesn't answer the question presented in a satisfactory way, in my opinion. He just says, yeah, I mean, perhaps that's just how things are. Which, I guess if that's the only answer he can give, that's the only answer he can give. But as far as I'm concerned, that's a question that is not answered to a satisfactory level by any stretch of the imagination. Now we'll hear how he's going to address this interdimensional side of things.
The framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics. And that is, if you want to imagine 3D objects such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
But you have not seen any documentation that that's what's occurring?
Only theoretical framework discussion. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause that there. This area of science is not my area, but it does sound fascinating to me, and I have heard of these concepts and ideas. And I will also note non-verbally that when he's talking about I'm not a scientist in this, he does a pretty substantial defensive gesture here. You're always going to see this come up, these palms facing forwards and perhaps pushing away on some level when a person is feeling defensive or wanting to give off the impression that they're warding off something. And a lot of time that would be criticism coming back. So he is already warding off this criticism that is likely going to be coming from the scientific communities in regards to what he's stating here, as there is no doubt more to the theory that he is stating than what he is stating. So he knows that. He's aware of that. His nonverbal communication shows that. Let's keep watching.
Okay. Occam's razor is that these aircraft, have they been identified that they are being produced by domestic, military and contractors? Is there any evidence that that's what's being recovered?
Not to my knowledge, plus the recoveries predate a lot of our advanced programs that I previously am witting of. So,
would it be safe to say that there could be a scenario today where you have an aircraft that crashes and because it's been involved in one program from one federal agency, and the agency that retrieves it is not aware of that program, and to them it appears alien in origin?
I mean, that's a hypothetical situation. I'm not aware of any historical situation that would match that you described. So
you're not aware. It has not happened that you're aware of.
That I'm aware of.
Okay, so throughout that, there were a number of nonverbal tells in regards to that. At the very end, as he's trying to respond to this, well, could it be possible that a UAP was crashed and then it was discovered and it was perhaps made by another government and we just didn't recognize it? And we're seeing a partial fear expression come in across his face as the corners of the mouth are being drawn down into the side. And he's also doing some defensiveness in regards to his opinion or his understanding or awareness or knowledge of the aspect itself. Now, perhaps, obviously, there can be things that he doesn't know, and that defensiveness is very warranted in that area as he's trying to make sure that people understand he's only speaking for his own personal experience on this. Non-verbally speaking throughout that, again, it felt rather synchronized. There are definitely some verbal pauses and stammers and stutters in his response, but not enough so that seems to stray from his baseline enough to really ping a red flag for me. Let's keep watching this.
Several months ago, my office received a protected disclosure from Eglin Air Force Base indicating that there was a UAP incident that required my attention. I sought a briefing regarding that episode and brought with me Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna. We asked to see any of the evidence that had been taken by flight crew in this endeavor and to observe any radar signature as well as to meet with the flight crew. We were not afforded access to all of the flight crew. And initially, we were not afforded access to images and to radar. Thereafter, we had a bit of a discussion about how authorities flow in the United States of America, and we did see the image. And we did meet with one member of the flight crew who took the image. The image was of something that I am not able to attach to any human capability, either from the United States or from any of our adversaries, and I'm somewhat informed on the matter, having served on the Armed Services Committee for 7 years, having served on the committee that oversees DARPA and advanced technologies for several years. When we spoke with the flight crew, and when he showed us the photo that he'd taken, I asked why the video wasn't engaged, why we didn't have a FLIR system that worked. Here's what he said. They were out on a test mission that day over the Gulf of Mexico. And when you're on a test mission, you're supposed to have clear airspace. Not supposed to be anything that shows up. And they saw a sequence of 4 craft in a clear diamond formation for which there is a radar sequence that I alone have observed in the United States Congress. One of the pilots goes to check out that diamond formation and sees a large floating, what I can only describe as an orb. Again, like I said, not of any human capability that I'm aware of. And when he approached, he said that his radar went down. He said that his FLIR system malfunctioned and that he had to manually take this image from one of the lenses, and it was not automated in collection as you would typically see in a test mission. So I guess I'll start with Commander Fravor. How should we think about the fact that this craft that was approached by our pilot had the capability of disarming a number of the sensor and collection systems on that craft?
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause that there just to make note. Obviously, this is kind of like its own little mini testimony in and of itself from somebody who's not sworn under oath or anything along those lines, but it is still extra details to be able to coincide with some of the things that have already been established and known. And so some factors that are in there that are fascinating to me is the orb side of things. We're talking about an orb, not a saucer, and that has been brought up by other people. And then this idea of technology jamming as our sensor systems have gone down or have been jammed or taken down as we draw close to these various UAPs. It is just something to be able to add some extra detail and information to our narrative that we're already understanding. Let's see how the response is.
Correct.
Well, I think this goes to that national security side, and you can go back through history of things showing up in certain areas and disabling our capabilities, which is disheartening. And for us, I mean, like I said, it completely disabled the radar on the aircraft when I tried to do it. And the only way we could see it is passively, which is how he got that image. So I think that's a concern on what are these doing, not only how do they operate, but their capabilities inside to do things like this.
And how should we think about 4 craft moving in a very clear formation, equidistant from one another, in a diamond? In all of the phenomenon, perhaps, Mr. Grave, that you've analyzed, have we ever seen multiple craft in a single formation?
I have one particular case, and that was during the gimbal incident. The recording on the AT FLIR system shows a single object that rotates. You hear the pilots refer to a fleet of objects that is not visible on the FLIR system, and that was something that I witnessed during the debrief as part of the radar data on the situational awareness page.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause that there. Obviously, there is a lot more to this hearing. If you would like to be able to hear more about this hearing, let me know in the comments below. So what I'm seeing from even just the footage that we're looking at so far, I have not seen anything that's pushing me away from believing that they believe themselves, at very least. There are obviously areas that we saw throughout there where there might be some questionable details, maybe something's being hidden, maybe something's being diverted, attention's being diverted, things like that. However, as far as the entirety of the narrative itself, I would still be encouraged to believe that they believe themselves. Now, whether or not that's actually true, or are aliens real, it's difficult to say. If we're going off of what they say, it seems as though we could say, yes, that they are true. At least they believe that they are true, and they seem to have a level of qualifications about them and experience about them that would push us to believe that. So our big question then is, why is this now being brought to the public's attention? Why wasn't it brought up before? If it has been going on as long as we have assumed or have been told that it has been going on, what's the reason for it now? Is it being used as a distraction? Is it some other thing that the government is doing? What else do we not know? It does open up the door for a lot of other questions to be asked, and I'm sure that there will be more hearings, there will be more things to be able to take a look at as this goes on. But you let me know how you feel about it in the comments below. Perhaps I've missed something. If you've seen something personally yourself, let me know in the comments below. Again, if you would like to be able to support the channel a little bit extra, go ahead and consider becoming a member. You'll get, like I said, some little icons and emojis and things like that to download and have next to your name. Check that out if you would like to. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome, as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.